Hello and welcome back to the Not Old Firm YouTube channel. My name is Ben Banks. Joined with James Black today to look over the weekend's action and some of the weekend's action that isn't happening again as the Premiership kicks off for the round 2 of the Premiership fixtures. We've played 11 match days, albeit not all clubs fulfilling those fixtures due to COVID problems and other things. But it is the second round of fixtures playing out again over the Premiership. We'll have a look at the fixtures that are happening, the fixtures are not, and all the different talking points that are involved with them, as well as hearing from Premiership managers along the way. And we'll get started in chronological order on the Saturday with the matches. First of all, Kilmarnock Hibs, and we heard from Hibs manager Jack Ross ahead of the game.
There's probably a couple of parts to that, Jamie, for me. I think, first of all, I think I've regularly spoken about the preference for clarity and consistency of message and information. But I've respected the fact that the world we're living in, if you take it just specific to football, has had challenges that have been unforeseen. I think that we seem at times to be desperate to search for blame, when the truth is, if clubs are doing what we're required to do, which I believe clubs are, then there's not much more we can do than that. And unless there's some real blatant disregard for the regulations, which again, I'd be confident that I think players, clubs, staff are respectful of, then there isn't anybody to blame for it. And that's, I think, the thing we have to be careful of. In the current climate, we don't just search for somebody to blame. And every time there's positive cases, we seem to assume that somebody has done something wrong, other than it being an outcome of what is going on currently. So, but again, going back to flipping it right back to the first point, I think once there is clarity and consistency in message, then that helps everybody move forward. I still think that there is room for games to be played, and I think maybe Brian Rice commented on this recently at Hamilton, that ultimately if the situation would mean that you had to play 3 and 4 games in a week, it's happened in Scottish football history, and not so distant past that happened, because of teams' involvement in European football, etc. If that's what we have to do to complete a season, then I don't think you would find any player, manager or coach complaining about it. So, if we ended up with games postponed that we had to squeeze in to a closer period, then so be it. I certainly don't think it's something that we should become too worried or paranoid about. It's a kind of modern day curse that we get panicky about having to play a certain number of games in a certain period of time, and how that affects players' physical, mental welfare at times. Players like playing football, and managers like managing teams that play football. So if we have to play loads of games in a short period, so be it. And hopefully it won't come to that.
Jack Ross there touching on potential forfeits and COVID-19 related issues. Shock ahead of the game this week. Kilmarnock hit with a disciplinary charge before their game with Hibs. They've been on a decent run of form in Premiership action, despite the fact they had to enter their full squad and coaching staff into self-isolation a few weeks ago. But they could be set to have a forfeit of 3-0 against Motherwell after that game was postponed due to COVID-19 problems. And now the SPFL could decide that they are to take a loss in that one. It'll be interesting to see if this comes through. I don't think anybody really deserves a loss in this climate, but
I disagree immediately on that one.
Well, if they're found guilty, then obviously. But I mean, it comes in. It's so many different factors. You've got the traffic jam of fixtures and all of these different things. But it does. If they aren't found guilty, then it would seem sort of harsh. However, if they are found guilty, then they do need to take the punishment that is coming their way. I'm pretty sure the SPFL have got unlimited powers in that regard.
Yeah, we're getting to the point now where, and this maybe sounds harsh on clubs, but we're past the point of pissing about now. We've had, and I'm sure somebody will probably take umbrage at this, but we've had far too many positive tests within Scottish football. We're only talking, at this point, we've only just started the divisions out with the Premiership. So up until last weekend, we had 12 teams active in this country. Yet somehow we were getting positive tests almost week in, week out, getting 3, 4, 5, and in some cases as many as an entire bloody squad having to self-isolate or having positive tests causing others to self-isolate. So yeah, there is absolutely no reason now why we're in a position where clubs are still having a squad decimated by this. If some clubs can do it, and can do it with minimal, so let me use Motherwell as an example. we were just talking about this before we started recording, but Motherwell have been particularly strict in how they're doing things. They've been very, very proactive, and they've had one positive case. So you can almost excuse that because we're at the point now where, and again, I'm just using Motherwell as an example, but they are doing everything that they can be seen to be doing to avoid potential infections and transmissions and what have you. When you're getting to the point where the same clubs are having 2, 3, 4 continuous weeks where they're having a few tests, a few positives here, a few positives there, a couple of positives, and then the next one, so it's time to stop treating them with kid gloves and just hammer them, because it's getting very, very close to the situation where if this keeps going, the season won't be finished, and if the season isn't finished, I genuinely fear for the long-term future of many, many Scottish clubs.
It's more the majority of clubs rather than the minority that have had actual positive tests now, regardless of whether it's.
But we've only had the minority of clubs playing so far. We've only had 12 out of 42 clubs actively playing week in, week out so far. Of those 12 clubs, we've had 2 have been fined already for breaching coronavirus regulations. A third has a charge. A fourth is almost certainly going to get an SPFL charge. A fifth has had a couple of different instances of positive tests and players self-isolating. So that's half the league already that we're getting to the point where they're either not doing things properly or they're not doing things at all. So, as I said, had it been one test at one club out of 12, absolutely, you let it slide, you let it go. Nothing's infallible. When you're at now almost half of the Premiership, I've had games postponed, I've had disciplinary charges, or facing disciplinary charges, and the goodwill and the courtesy very, very quickly runs dry.
Mm-hmm. Enough on Kilmarnock. Hibs, we also heard from the Motherwell manager Stephen Robinson just shortly after the news of the positive test at Fir Park, and here's his verdict on things.
Yeah, it's frustrating, of course. I think the biggest frustration is you've got to cram the games back in again with a small squad. But like we're no different than anybody else. Everybody outside probably the top 2 or 3 teams have got huge squads. Sorry, they've got big squads. Everyone's got smaller squads. It's going to be a real push this season. But we're happy to be playing football in any shape or form, and we're going to have to deal with what's put in front of us. And this is now an issue that's going to continue to keep going, and we just have to deal with it, same as everybody else. I don't think there's an advantage or disadvantage now. People are going to get hit with this virus no matter how hard we try. It's in society, and we just have to cope with it and get on with it. Yeah, I mean, we've had a positive case ourselves on Tuesday, and got that confirmed. I got confirmed yesterday morning, so that player is self-isolating. So we're certainly not immune to it, and St Mirren and Kilmarnock are not the only clubs that are having it. Everyone's having it. If you look throughout the world of football, at Standard Liège, a players missing last night. Scotland, a players missing from. It's going to be something that we're just all going to have to cope with. So, as I said, we've had a positive. All the rest of the staff and players tested negative. We're going to retest. Well, we've retested already this morning, just as a precautionary measure. So again, I think that highlights the protocols of the Scottish football. We are catching it. We are trying to isolate the people that have it and stay in control of it, because we're not going to get rid of it. Scottish football is not going to get rid of it. World football is not going to get rid of it. As people get paid a lot more money than us to try and find cures to that, and hopefully they do that sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, we all just have to adjust to the world we're living in.
Unfortunate for Mull, they have been very, very strict in the way they operate their protocols. I've seen it firsthand. Stephen Robinson literally has hand sanitizer dispensers every 30 yards at Fir Park just to minimise the effect it could have in a squad. Every single player, every single staff member that comes in the building at Fir Park is to wear a mask. So they have been very strict, and by the sounds of it, it sounds like Lanarkshire's, I think I read stats earlier that in terms of virus cases by square metre of the population, Lanarkshire's actually get the highest rate in Scotland just now. So it was only a matter of time before Motherwell did get affected by that, because the virus is really contagious in that area just now. But they've not had a game in a month. The Kilmarnock game before the international break was postponed. They didn't play during that due to their involvement in Europa League football earlier in the season. And then the St Mirren game last week was postponed. And they could actually, I mean, even though they haven't kicked a ball in a month, they could end up picking 6 points from those games, which would obviously be great for them. And Ross County are sort of a wee bit forgotten in all this story. They've obviously looking to build on a decent result last week. But the main talking point obviously is Mull's positive test. Not so much because it is Mull having the positive test, more just as another sign of this virus wreaking havoc on the Scottish football season. Moving on to St Johnstone Dundee United as well, the Tayside derby. It was a draw the first time round for these sides, and it should be another fairly interesting clash. St Johnstone are in better form now compared to what they were a few weeks ago. They've scored a few more goals. Stevie May looking really good. Dundee United as well have showed signs of recovery, albeit they weren't great against Aberdeen, but it was a positive result, and they could have the likes of Lawrence Shankland and Mark McNulty up front. So how do you see the Tayside derby going, James?
On paper, this should be a relatively straightforward one for Dundee United, but I'm kind of going to buck the trend a bit here, and I've got a sneaky feeling St Johnstone might just grab something for this. I know they've kind of got out of their slump a little bit so far, and admittedly it was against the lower division opposition that's helped them get out of it. But now they've kind of got the wind at their backs, it's kind of helped them kick on a little bit and start to find a little bit of a groove. So yeah, it's one of these games where both sides have been, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here and saying that they've both been very, very inconsistent at best this season. So yeah, I can just, there's something about it, I can just see St Johnstone just snatching something.
The big talk point again is a game that isn't happening. Again, it's in Paisley, St Mirren, Hamilton. Last week it was Mull of Lanarkshire who had their game postponed in Paisley. This week it's Hamilton. Hamilton haven't had to go searching for their own COVID troubles. They're only getting the likes of Jamie Hamilton and Andy Winter back from isolation and actual positive tests. They had the positive test trouble themselves in various stages throughout this season. St Mirren now, I think it would be fair to say, have had it the worst. They had 7 false positives before a ball was even kicked in the Premiership season. They had obviously the postponement last week, but on top of that, they had their goalkeeper department wiped out in September, which caused complete havoc and basically ruined any run of form they could put together on that wee run. It's disjointed their full season, and again, they could be facing a really, really tough situation because as of we record this, the full squad's been entered into isolation. Tony Fitzpatrick saying obviously that the health and safety of the staff members at the club need to come first, but it could result in them, I mean, if they need to enter isolation in 2 weeks, that means obviously they can't, that's including Jim Goodwin and his coaching staff, they can't really, I mean, I don't know how they play games during that period, but on top of that as well, what happens to these 2 games that are already being postponed? They could potentially lose 6 points in that, going to teams around about them in the table. St Mirren, Hamilton, currently bottom of the league. Mull 10th, albeit Mull do have a few games in hand on the teams above them, and wins in them could take them well into the top 6. But with all that aside, it's just an absolutely horrific time for St Mirren.
I need to take issue with Tony Fitzpatrick's statement.
What one? Because there's been lots of statements.
That's very true. Tony Fitzpatrick has not been shy recently. Saying that the players' health and safety has to come first. Now, that is something I wholeheartedly agree with and I will not question in the slightest. However, if that's the case, what the hell are St Mirren doing? Like, seriously, what's going on at St Mirren just now that they're having such consistent, regular issues with testing and positive results? If the players' health and safety is paramount, which I don't doubt for a second that it is, but why is it consistently being St Mirren that's having issues? Why is it not Rangers? Why is it not Motherwell? Why is it not St Johnstone? Why is it not Dundee United? Why is it not any other? Because you can go through a host of clubs, but St Mirren, it seems to be a near constant thing just now. And I don't doubt for a second that people are very much taking it seriously. But I really have to question whether everybody's taking it seriously, because it's kind of that whole thing, there's no smoke without fire. And to keep getting positive results so regularly, they're doing something wrong. Whether they're doing it intentionally or not, I don't know. I don't want to speculate because it would be unfair on them. But something that they're doing isn't right.
I think that's the thing with a lot of people with this one is that once, I mean, there was lots of sympathy for the goalkeeping situation. I think people thought that was quite bad, and in that situation, I think people were calling for the game to be called in that one because they were left at a massive disadvantage in that. But now that it's happened for a second time and then a third time, and now that other clubs are being massively impacted on it, that's where the questions arise. I don't think anybody doubts that St Mirren aren't at least trying to implement protocols to prevent this from happening, but people are wondering why, even though it has affected other clubs, St Mirren don't. I mean, when it rains, it fucking pours in Paisley. So I think that's where the problems lie for them, is that it's not just one positive case here and there. It's 5, it's 6.
The thing with it as well is and I know this. I'm kind of loath to say this because I'm sure some people take this very much the wrong way, and I don't mean this as in clubs as such, but I more mean fans. In our position, where we are lucky enough to get to go to games just now, it really has me second guessing whether I'm comfortable going to games at St Mirren. Because when you're seeing, and this would be the same for any club. If any club has consistent issues where they're having positive tests week after week after week, it raises the point of anybody that's going there starts to question, well, am I safe? Am I going to pick this up? Is someone else's slackness going to allow me to catch this virus? And something needs to be done. Something needs to be done now. The SPFL have been reactionary at best to everything that's going on over the last 7 or 8 months. And I mean, I could be a lot stronger than that, but I'm trying my best not to. But I mean, none of this is anything new to people. We've been under largely these restrictions now, going all the way back to March. It is now the end of October. If football clubs aren't getting on top of this, then I'm sorry, but I genuinely question whether it's worthwhile allowing them to compete. Because if clubs can't get on top of this, it's going to end the season prematurely.
The big question is what you just alluded to there. Will this season finish? I mean, I know a lot of people don't. I mean, I think Brian Rice gave a good quote. I mean, we try for football to come back, don't try for it to go away, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing him a wee bit. There was something to those effect. But, I mean, you are seeing, I think, I seen someone to do with Hamilton retweeting that with this game being postponed, I think Hamilton's next game's in 19 days or something like that against Rangers. And then they've already got a big fixture pile up there. They just about cleared the Aberdeen one that was rearranged midweek there. A 4-2 defeat for them, but still, I mean, they got it cleared. But that's going to, I mean, Motherwell have got mountain games against Kilmarnock and St Mirren. I mean, if I just go into the league table here, we have supposedly played 11 games. Everybody's meant to have played everybody right now. But
who's actually played a full 11 games so far?
But as it stands, Hamilton bizarrely have actually managed to play 11 games now. St Johnstone, Livingston, Ross County, Dundee United, and Hibs, Rangers as well. So Celtic, Aberdeen, Kilmarnock, Motherwell have played the fewest games with 9, and St Mirren. So it's around a 50-50 split for who's actually played the games. But more or less, I'd say every club's played at least 85% of their games. But
this is before the bad weather hits. This is before.
That's the thing for me, is that it comes into cold and flu season, and then
not even just cold and flu season, waterlogged pitch season.
Well, that's the thing as well. I mean, you've got that problem, but on top of that, I mean, and just in terms of the virus sticking on that, is that you need to isolate if you've got a cough. Mm-hmm. If you get that with a cold, even though you'll get tested 3 or 4 times. I mean, we've seen in the Scotland squad with Ryan Christie that he had to stay in isolation despite testing negative for the virus 6 times. So it's, I mean, surely even if, say, an outbreak, the cold hits Hamilton or St Johnstone or whoever it may be, then does that team need to self-isolate with a cold? It's just, It is, but can the season, to round off the Saturday games, can the season get finished?
No.
Optimistic as ever.
Absolutely. No, and this is going to sound quite harsh, but if it doesn't get completed, it's almost certainly going to be at the door of the clubs and players. Like, unlike last season, where the season got stopped through no fault of anybody, and I don't want anybody to think I'm kind of trying to apportion blame or anything at the point. But when last season was called to halt, like, you couldn't go, well, this club hasn't followed the guidelines, or that club hasn't done this, or this club hasn't done that. There was none of that. It was a blanket. Everybody's going into lockdown and tough titty, really. This time, it's going to be the actions of clubs that cause the season to get pulled, because we're going to continue to see clubs having positive tests. And you're going to get to a point, I think, where the public in general are very quickly going to lose patience with it. And I mean, I say this as a quote-unquote football journalist. I'm losing patience with football clubs. I'm genuinely getting quite annoyed and pissed off seeing football clubs going, well, we've got 4 positive tests this week, we've got 2 last week, we've got 5 next week. It's not good enough. It's just simply not good enough.
Well, to take off the cheery note into the Sunday games, we'll just rattle through them quickly. Aberdeen versus Celtic, a big one at Pittodrie. Celtic coming into it a bit shaky. I mean, they're very vulnerable at the moment, and if ever there was a time for Aberdeen to beat Celtic, it should be now. Aberdeen in fairly decent form this season. Celtic probably, don't want to sound too harsh, but probably the worst they've looked in a few years, at least under Lennon, since he came back into the job. So if Aberdeen have got a massive opportunity, but a big question have been asked of Aberdeen, have they actually got the bottle to beat Celtic? You don't think so. We're not going to ask for any further analysis on that, but it's a big test for Aberdeen, I think. I think if they go there and they put in a lifeless display like they have done in recent seasons against Celtic, then it'll just prove to everybody that they just haven't got that mentality edge to just take them to that next level. They're just about there. They're not on the door, but this is the big one for them. Arguably the biggest game of the season for them.
When was the last time you can think of watching Aberdeen play Celtic and say that's an Aberdeen team with a bit of bottle about it that's willing to get in their faces and ruffle them up?
Yeah, it's been a very long. I mean, you had the 1-0 victory at Parkhead a couple of seasons ago, but I mean that was
the last day victory, which just so happened to give Aberdeen second place in the league and deny Rangers it. That's
a conspiracy theory we're not going to touch on today. We'll move on to Livingston's trip to Rangers. Obviously focusing on Livingston, a poor result for them away at home. To Kilmarnock last week, who battled really well, despite the fact their squad had only came out of self-isolation 48 hours earlier. Kilmarnock battled really well, and Gary Holt's side, I think I seen a quote saying an angry Livingston will travel to Ibrox this week. But given the way Rangers are played, they've not conceded a shot on target to Celtic and then Standard Liège, perhaps most impressively, and Kamar Roof punting balls into the net from 60 yards out. It's going to, even if Rangers rotate like many expect them to do, they can still bring in the likes of Stephen Davis and things like that. And it's going to be a test of whether Livingston can compete with that quality, but a tough test for them. Don't like using the term free hit, but Livingston will be looking for a decent performance in that, if not the result. And that's Premiership action. Done for the week. I'm rattling through them. We're getting through these fairly sharp. So I had plenty of action on this week, and I'm sure we've probably not heard the last of the COVID debate as well. It's going to rumble on and rumble on. I'm sure even if as we record this, more information will come to light about St Mirren's situation, Kilmarnock's situation, and we'll review it all next week on the channel when the review comes out. We've also had an exclusive interview with Daniel Bachman, Kilmarnock's former star and Watford number 2 just now.
Right, come on, Ben, you need to throw the line in. Just throw the line in. Just do that. You know the one.
What one? I don't know what you're...
You know exactly the one that I'm talking about.
Is it about a man in a black cape and he lives in Gotham City?
No, yeah, it's from him. He's bold prediction, because this needs to be out there. The Watford drug tester players.
I don't know.
Bloody well should.
Well, if you want to find out what that statement was that Daniel Bachman made, do go onto the video and like it and subscribe to our channel while you're watching that video. fairly decent interview with him, and thanks as well to Watford and Daniel Backman for making that happen. We've got plenty of action and reports from across the SPFL this weekend. Well, in the Premiership, we were meant to be at St Mirren Hamilton, but positive test in that one called that off. So we're going to have action from Kilmarnock versus Hibs, Mullow versus Ross County, or 2 Premiership games in the Championship. I take a trip to Dens Park for Dundee versus Morton and Tayside. And well, in the League One, we have Partick Thistle versus Airdrie, and James, you're taking in Falkirk versus Forfar. So that rounds off our busy weekend, and it'll only get busier from here on in, which is a good thing for us after all those months in cold storage. But that's all we've got time for today. Please do remember to subscribe to us, like the video, and until next time,